Welcome to Family Twist. I'm Corey, and today we're sharing something very special with you, a conversation that we thought was lost forever. When we first sat down with Wendy Kramer, co-founder of the Donor Sibling Registry, the second half of our recording got corrupted. We were heartbroken, but thanks to some audio magic, we've recovered the full conversation, and now, the first time, you'll hear the entire thing, unedited, uninterrupted, and unbelievably powerful. Wendy's story is one of truth-telling, advocacy, and love. What started with one little boy asking about his biological father turned into a global movement that's helped tens of thousands of donor-conceived individuals find family and find themselves. If you've ever wrestled with family secrets, identity, or what it means to be known, this episode will resonate deep. Wendy, thanks for joining us on Family Twist.
Thanks so much for having me.
So when Kendall and I started this podcast, we were definitely naive about the world of donor conception. And I would bet that most people are pretty naive about it. Is that a fair statement?
I think you don't know until you know, right? So once it becomes a part of your life, I think you just become an expert.
Yeah. So can you kind of just take us back a little bit? Like, how did the donor conception aspect enter your world?
Right. So let's see. The short version is I was married and my ex-husband had some infertility issues. So in late 1989, we went to a clinic in Denver and used an anonymous donor. And my son was born in May of 1990. And the year after that, my ex-husband and I split up. And from that point, I was raising my son as an only parent. When he was 2 years old, he came home from preschool and said, "So did my dad die or what?" And I went, "Okay, I guess we're having this conversation now." And we had a very short but very important conversation because it was the cornerstone conversation of, to make a human being, I wanted a baby and you have to have an egg from a mommy and a sperm from a daddy. We didn't have the sperm. I went to a nice doctor. It was like a 2-year-old 40-second conversation, and then he asked me something about choo-choo trains and then we were on to different things. But then as he grew up, and then he just became very curious. By the time he was 6 years old, he was looking at me saying, "I want to know who my biological father is." And at that point, I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? What do I do? Of course you're curious, but nobody educated me because the clinics and the sperm banks and the egg clinics, nobody properly educates and counsels donors or prospective parents. So basically, at that point, we had to wait for social media to be invented, and we waited till the year 2000. And Yahoo groups came to be. That was like the first, kind of a social media thing. And we started a little group thinking, well, maybe there are people that want to make mutual consent contact with each other, half siblings or donors, parents. And so we created the vehicle by which all these people could find each other and make connections that the sperm banks and the egg clinics were not allowing.
Very cool. So let's go back to when you went to the clinic and you were looking at prospective donors. Like, what were you looking for?
So in my case, my ex-husband and I we sat with a lady at the desk and we said, we want to match him. And she's at the desk going, "Well, I have 5'10" if you want the green eyes. If you want the Irish background, we're going to have to go to 5'9". And I could see my ex-husband's leg was shaking nervously. He was not comfortable with the process. And I basically just said to her, "This is what he looks like. Find somebody that matches." And literally the next week I was pregnant with who knows what. I had no idea what the sperm was, where it came from. I knew absolutely nothing until my son was 3 years old. And he's got this really blonde hair. And I'm wondering, what about this, his biological father? It's half of who he is. And I know nothing. And it was at that point that the clinic was like, "Oh, you didn't get the donor profile?" No, nobody gave me anything. And so when my son was 3, then it was like, oh, all, many of the missing pieces came into play into who my son was, and the way his brain worked and his physical features. Like, so much is genetic, and from there I could put at least some of the pieces together.
It is wild. It seems like the more conversations that we have with people, it's like the people that they're dealing with at the clinics are like, it's their first day at Starbucks. It's like, oh, hold on, I don't know how to do a latte, I mean, it's just insane.
No, because their whole goal there is to keep these people apart and to put as much anonymity as they can get in there, even when it's fake and they're being deceptive. They pretend that anonymity is the best for everybody involved, when we know through dozens of research studies and papers that we've published, plus 23 years of 88,000 people and anecdotal stories, anonymity is not in anybody's best interests, and nor is it possible anymore.
Exactly. So were you able to at some point find the donor?
Well, so when my son was 14, this is before Ancestry, before 23andMe, there was one little company called Family Tree DNA, and they came to us and said, our new commercial DNA services might be helpful to your community. People could find out, like, countries of origin, things like that. So they asked my son if he wanted to do it. He was 14. He was like, sure, maybe I'll find out a little bit more about my ancestry that I don't know about. So he swabbed his cheek, and 9 months later, he matched with two people, very distant relatives, both with the same last name. And they said, if your son is as related as we are to each other, which he is, you have that common ancestor. They all had the same last name. And it was at that point we went, oh my God, I think we know the last name of your donor. And it took us a few days to put it together. And my son was the very first donor conceived person to figure out who his biological father was through a DNA test.
Wow.
When it's Y DNA, it goes from male to male to male to male, virtually unchanged. So when you're tracing your Y DNA through paternal lines, it's not really that hard because it's a very clear lineage.
Still quite impressive that his distant relatives were able to trace the family back to the 1600s, though. But before we had all this technology like Ancestry and 23andMe.
Exactly. Well, since then, I did at the beginning of COVID as a project. I went back to see how far I could go with that one lineage that they got to the 1600s, and I went all the way back to BC.
Wow.
I know, it was crazy. I kept going male to male to male to male, and I would find his father, and then I would find his father and his father. And because they were like, I don't know, one guy was like the king of Gaul. Like, there were kings and dukes and things like that where there were actual records.
Wow. That's so cool.
So I think we knew a lot more about the donor's ancestry than the donor and his family knew.
Now, did you have any interest in genealogy before you got pregnant?
It's funny. When I was pregnant, that's when all my family photos came out, because I think it was like this realization that I was creating a new generation, and I wanted to tie to the generations that came before me. So it's funny, like pictures of my great grandmother and my grandmother, and, all the pictures I had kind of came out on the mantle. And also knowing that I was creating a child that only would know one half of their ancestry, it therefore became probably a little bit more important for me that he had an ancestry that he could link to. So yeah, that's when it really became important. Before that, not so much. I mean, before that, I didn't even know if I wanted a baby. If you put like a puppy and a baby in front of me, I would have definitely chosen the puppy, But then it's like my biological clock. So once that came over me, then I wanted to create of course you're creating family for your child, but I wanted to create a family history for him as well.
Wow. All right. So he was the first to find his biological father. How did that happen, and what happened from there?
So the day that we kind of put all the pieces together, we had a great big piece of white paper with a line down the middle. Everything we knew about donor 1058 from the donor profile, height and weight and his degrees and things like that, we wrote on one side. And then on the other side, we wrote everything about what his potential biological father would be. We knew the last name, we knew his birth date from the donor profile. And every time something matched between donor 1058 and this guy with this last name, we would highlight in yellow. And the page just became more and more and more yellow until my son, who's 15 at this point, says to me, "Mom, it's the guy." And I'm like, "You don't know, when you're as old as I am, life throws you curveballs until you're 100% sure, and he's like rolling his eyes at me. Well, he was right. It was the guy. And then I was scared to death because my son at that point was so vulnerable. Literally every birthday candle he had ever blown out was with the wish, I want to know who my biological father is. So now we know who the guy is, and I'm scared to death for him. What if the guy says, "Get the hell out of here. I didn't sign up for this." My son, however, was fine. He's like, "Mom, don't worry. If the guy doesn't want to know me now, when I'm 18, I'll go hop on a plane and I'll go shake his hand, So he was okay. I was a nervous wreck. And I said, okay, let's just sleep on it. Let's think about it. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you. We're a team, just like we had been through the whole doing the DSR and all of that. So I go to sleep, and then at 1 a.m, Ryan wakes me up. "Mom, I just sent him an email." And I'm like, "Oh God, so much for collaboration, I read the email. It was just beautiful, perfect. My son was 15, but he also was a sophomore at university because he was advanced by 4 years. So he's 15, but in some ways he's much older than 15. So then the next 48 hours, my mantra was, "Please be kind, please be kind." I thought, even if you don't want to know my son, that's okay. Just be kind, And so it was 48 hours later, again, 1 a.m, because nothing can happen in daytime. My son comes into my room. Mom, he just wrote me back. And all I remember is falling to my knees and saying, "Was he kind?" And my son, with tears coming down his cheeks, is shaking his head yes. And that was the connection. And from there, they got to know each other, through email. And my son got to ask all the crucial questions like, "Do you ride mountain bikes? Do you like Led Zeppelin?" Well, but for teenagers, that's what it is. But he asked him, "Are you married? Do you have kids?" And after 6 weeks, my son gets an email from the donor that says, "Do you want to come to California to meet me and your grandparents?"
Wow.
Ooh.
And off we went. And it was a profound and life-changing weekend for my son, and therefore for me. I got to watch a sense of peace that came over him. It was like all the other missing puzzle pieces clicked into place. He kept looking at me the whole weekend with these deer in the headlights eyes saying, "I know who my biological father is." And yes, Ryan, you do. And then on the airplane on the way home, he looks at me, he's just sitting there, his eyes still, you could tell he was in shock, but there was this sense of peace that he was filled with that I had never seen before. And he says, "If I never see those people again, I'll be okay because I know where I come from." It was really important for him to know that he came from good people. And it was also really important for him. And this is so many people think donor conceived people are have to find the donors and track down the donor and know who the donor is. But I think for a lot of donor conceived people, including my son, it's more about being known. I want to be known. I want this person to know that I exist and that I'm somebody to be proud of. So when my son got that, they knew he existed and that he was somebody to be proud of. That, it was like just icing on the cake, all of it. And that was 18 years ago. And now, we're all family to each other. So we've kind of lived what's possible. When you make decisions coming from a place of love instead of coming from a place of fear, there's so many more possibilities for expanding your family and having more love and more people to love your kid. And there's just so many good things once you kind of clear up what the fears and the hesitations are.
Yeah. Wendy, can you share the moment that Ryan and his father first saw each other and locked eyes?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we're waiting in a hotel lobby for him to come in, and we're both, my son, we had been up in the hotel room. When I say bouncing off the walls, I mean like literally bouncing off the walls. He's bouncing bed to bed to bed to bed to floor to bed to bed. He is so excited. Like I just thought he was going to like explode. So finally it's time to go downstairs and we practice getting off the elevator looking cool, calm, and collected. And we get down there and the guy's not there. We're like, oh shoot, we go back, we do it again. So we get out of the elevator looking cool, calm, and collected. He's still not there. We're like, okay, we can't do this again. Then we go and we hide behind the bar right by the front lobby because we're going to come out like this whole thing. So I was like, let's put some laughter and fun in here so he doesn't like completely have a meltdown because he's so nervous. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we finally see the guy come in. I'm like, okay, there's my son's face walking in the door. Wow. He smiles. I'm like, oh my God, those are Ryan's teeth. And he puts his hand out and Ryan shakes his hand. And it's like, it's surreal, absolutely surreal. We go outside. We're going to walk down the block to get something to eat. And I let them walk ahead of me, just let them do their bonding thing. I stay a little bit behind. We go into the restaurant and sit down. The first thing they did when they sat down was go hand to hand. And it's a really familiar thing, a really common thing with guys meeting their biological fathers. And it must be like it's a bonding thing, measuring hands. Then they did their feet. It's like for girls, they would just hug. And maybe for guys, they just can't do that or something. So this is like, it's something, but it's making a connection, right? In the way that they could make their very first connection. And it was sweet. Wow. It was very, very sweet. And my son was 15 then, and now he's 33. And he just got his 28th half sibling 2 weeks ago. So his sibling group keeps growing and growing. So it's like the never ending story,
Is the donor father open to meeting his other children?
Yeah, so we have a little Facebook page just for, Donor 1058, and we welcome each new member. And my son's biological father, Lance, is in the group, and he welcomes everybody. A couple of years ago, and I actually wrote it, I put the whole thing in this book, Donor Family Matters. In 2019, one of the half-siblings got married and she invited all the half-siblings to come to her wedding. I rented a big house in Portland, Oregon, and Lance came and I was in the house. So we had 7 or 8 half-siblings who were meeting each other for the first time and also meeting their biological father for the first time. And it was another really profound experience where everybody walked in as strangers, sort of, that looked alike. And by the end of the weekend, everybody was hugging and crying. And, it was incredible that I got to see, I facilitate that on the Donor Sibling Registry every day. We match people, but to actually with my own eyes and experience a group meeting like that was, it was just stunning. Really a wonderful, amazing experience that I'm so thankful for.
Absolutely. Wow. So I would imagine for some folks, once they'd had that weekend and met their biological father and grandparents, that might be sort of the end of that journey. But you and Ryan have gone on to help a lot of other people. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, it's so funny when we first found Lance. I think at that point, the Donor Sibling Registry maybe had 15,000 people or something. And several people said to me, oh, well, now that you found Ryan's biological father, is at the end of the Donor Sibling Registry. Like they thought, like mission accomplished. And I was like, oh, God, no. Now that we've experienced it, I'm like 10 times more committed. I want everybody to have this opportunity, So, yeah, it became, I had a full-time job that I worked up until 2009, along with the DSR, which is a full-time job. And then when I wrote that last check for Ryan's master's degree, that's the day I quit my job. And since 2009, the DSR is my full-time job. We have now connected almost 25,000 people with their half siblings and or their biological mothers and fathers, so the egg donor families as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we connect people. We have 88,000 members. We connect people every day. Between 3 and 10 people connect with a half sibling or a donor. So it's not like, oh, occasionally we match people. It's like, no, it's every day.
Wow.
Cool.
So I just
Very
feel
cool.
like privileged to be like that's my job, like
Yeah.
it's just amazing. So that's like the good part of it are the connections. But through the connections, we all came to realize that the industry is pretty unethical and irresponsible. So that's kind of like the underbelly of all the good is like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, they lied to my donor. They lied to donors even now about limiting the number of kids. We have many groups, over 100 half siblings, even over 200, because they don't keep records. So any commitment to keeping a low number for one donor is a complete lie, because you can't set limits until you have accurate records, which they don't.
Right.
They don't update medical records. They don't share medical information, even when it's urgent medical information. Sometimes they keep selling the sperm of a donor who has died. I mean, this blows my mind, without telling the parents. The stuff that they do is, at the beginning, I think many of us thought this is the medical industry, right? So HIPAA, first do no harm, and like medical ethics. But what many of us have come to realize is that this isn't the medical industry. These are sperm sellers. That's it. They have, go on their website. It's all marketing materials. The goal here is to sell sperm. So it's not about accurate record keeping or doing the right thing or being ethical or being responsible. It is just about selling sperm, and nobody's watching. There's no oversight. There's no regulation. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So, what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
It is. I mean, the more people we talk to, it's just shocking what we hear about this industry. And it does sound like things are starting to slowly move in the right direction as far as legislation goes. But how involved are you in that and making change?
Nothing has changed. Nothing. Like the legislation that has gone through doesn't really change anything, because the reason it went through is because it doesn't change anything. If there's any legislation that's put forward about setting limits, keeping accurate records, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, the ASRM, they have lobbyists and they squelch it before it even happens. So these little legislation pieces that have gone through here or there haven't changed a thing. Absolutely nothing. They're doing today
pockets.
what they did 10 years ago, what they did 20 years ago.
Wow.
Does
So,
do you,
the best we can do is, in light of that, just keep doing what we're doing, because when you can connect with these people, then you can share medical information directly with each other. So if the
Mhm.
industry, if they're not going to do their job, then our facilitating these matches helps people kind of monitor themselves. Like, people can come to our website, they're promised that a donor now is no more than 20 kids or 20 families. They can come to the DSR and see all the postings and go, oh, I guess there's actually 75 kids. So,
Right.
all of our records are open. Anybody can see them. And, medical information is being shared, and that's the best we can do to make sense of a really nonsensical industry.
Do you know whether Lance knows whether his sperm is still being distributed, or
No, it's not on California Cryobank's bit, but
Mhm.
there were several families in the 90s who wanted a second child, who went back, and then he redonated. I don't know why he would have to redonate. So here's something that people think: each donation is like a potential child, right? But actually,
Mhm.
each donation can create between 4 and 24 potential children. Each donor
Yeah.
makes a year-long commitment to donate 2 to 3 times a week. My donor donated 5 years. So if you take that to the max, 3 times a week, 75 potential children a week, that's a potential 19,000 sellable vials of sperm. So why they had to have him come back and donate more is beyond me.
Right.
Like, why
Wow.
would you let a donor
Wow.
donate 5 years when you're telling him you'll have no more than 10 kids?
Right.
Well, because they were just lying. They were lying to him, and
Wow.
Bingo.
and
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, for a lot of these donors are college students who are like, man, I'm broke. I could use the money, and if it gives a family a baby, then great.
Yeah. No, we've done the research on donors. Why did you donate? And the number one reason is the money. A close second is to help families, and usually it's those two together. And I can't remember the exact words we use, but it's something like, if one of me is awesome, many of me would be awesomer.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah, spreading my seed. And again, I think it's a
Yep.
guy thing back from caveman times or something. Just like wanting to get yourself out there everywhere. So that was number 3 reason. So it's up there.
Wow. And I've always had a savior complex, so I can completely relate to that mentality. I really have. Especially at that point in my life, I would have thought exactly that third thing as well.
Well, when you were in college, did you ever see the advertise? So the advertisements are like,
Yes.
come make $1,400 a month for doing what you would do for free anyway.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And the only thing that stopped me from doing it, because I wanted to, was that I was married to my ex-wife at a ridiculously young age, and she was opposed to it. And I think if she hadn't been, I could have, 19,000 children out there, because I was
Wow.
very interested in the money part of it.
Hey, $1,400 a month for a college student,
Exactly.
it's a
boy.
great
Yeah.
business model, right? Because
Yeah.
then they're paying you $100 a donation, and women are paying $1,000 for one vial. Your donation could be 24 of those vials, 24,000 they're earning,
Mhm.
and they paid you $100.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's a money-making machine with lobbyists in Washington, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's why
Yeah.
none of the issues can be fixed.
Well, I mean, if Oprah can talk about it and things haven't changed, then I don't know who can.
In the beginning, when we first started getting all that media, when we did Oprah twice. This is great. We did 60 Minutes. We did everything. And we thought, this is going to bring it into the public, and then something will be done. Nope, they just ignored it. And they ignored it.
Yeah.
Then there were a few lawsuits, and we're like, this is what we need, a lawsuit. That'll get things to change. Nope, they just pay off the people. Then there's a gag order and nothing changes. So if media didn't do it, public humiliation didn't do it, lawsuits didn't do it, it's like I just keep turning my attention back to, okay, what can I do? And running the Donor Sibling Registry, it's like, okay, at least I'm making a difference for the families. I changed the industry. It's been 23 years. Maybe somebody will do it at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. And at least I have a place where I can put my focus that is actually doing something and helping families and, sharing medical information and kids that get to grow up knowing all of their parents, biological, and otherwise, and educating people and putting, articles and books and research together so that people can make informed decisions. I didn't have that ability to make a fully informed decision and choices about what would affect now parents can make fully informed choices about what will affect not only them, but their kids for decades, and I think that's the right of a parent to make those choices fully informed. The sperm banks are not going to inform them, because if sperm banks adequately counseled and informed donors, most of the donors wouldn't donate. Like if they were honest and said, look, with DNA testing, anybody can find you. We have no accurate records, and you're probably going to have like 150 kids out there. A lot of the donors are going to be like, no, thanks. But they don't educate the donors, and the donors, they get them in a place of when they're like really wanting money. And then they get the parents who are in a place of desperation. I remember it. I was there. Just give me the baby and I'll figure everything else out later, because people are saying to me, doing what I do, like, well, didn't you think you'd have a curious child? And my honest reply is nope. Never even crossed my mind, because I was so singly focused on give me the baby, everything else later. When you're told by a doctor, you'll never have kids together, and this is your only way, whether you're, a heterosexual couple, whether you're LGBT, whether you're a single mother by choice, you're still in that place of desperation of like, this is the only way that we can have the baby. So make it happen. And you're just in a place of desperation where you're not as likely to, put on your research hat and do your due diligence.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. No judgment there.
No. Just to go back to something you said earlier, it's kind of cracks me up that 2-year-old Ryan came home and said, "Is my dad dead?" Or like that's where his brain went. That's the worst possible thing.
He was at preschool. He saw moms and dads picking up kids, right?
Yeah.
So in his mind, I don't know, maybe he had just watched Lion King or something. I don't know. or Bambi, where the mother died or something. You know what I mean? Like, so he knew in his mind that would be one possibility, But yeah. And then after that, because he learned at such a young age, basically before he would ever remember, then it was never a big deal for him. He's like, my name's Ryan Kramer. I play piano. I'm good at math. I'm a donor baby, and I live in Nederland, Colorado. It was just like a part of who he was and his identity. And even like when he was about 6 or 7, it was such a part of his identity that he would meet new people, like new adults, and he'd stick his hand out to shake their hand, and he'd say, "Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm a donor baby." And the adults like wouldn't know, they would be all embarrassed and not know where to look. And Ryan was just like, that was his identity at that point. And I just let him, I wanted him to be proud of every part of himself, including that part. And at that moment in time, at 6 or 7, he was integrating that into his identity. And, at some point, obviously, he doesn't do that anymore, but it was a necessary step for him that into his identity. And he did that.
Sure.
And then it was never a big deal. He went there's this small but very vocal group of angry donor conceived people who I think never had the proper parental support. So with disclosure and then afterwards or being curious, and they just haven't processed through the anger yet.
Yep.
And I didn't want
Yeah.
that for my son.
No, in the short amount of time that we've spent with you, I know we can both say that you are an awesome mom.
Yeah.
and that's the way it should happen. I mean, I think that's a lot of the anger there, and not just with, donor conceived people, but,
Sure.
Anybody gets a secret, a shock, Oh,
Yes.
So that's me and Ryan. Our close relationship in part is because his whole donor journey we did as a team. It wasn't like I'm telling him what to think about it. When he was angry, like when he was 7, he was saying, I want to know who my biological father is. Like the sperm bank knows it. What if my donor wants to know me and I want to know him? The sperm bank won't let us know each other. And I empowered him by having him write a letter to the sperm bank. I knew it wouldn't do anything, but I wanted him to have a sense of empowerment. Like, you are not a victim in this. So he wrote a letter. I want you to give me this information. It was a pretty stern letter. And I had him address the envelope and we mailed it together, all like this empowering thing. Of course, they never acknowledged it or whatever, but I didn't want him to feel like a victim in this. I wanted him to have some power in the situation. We had no idea that ultimately he would definitely have some power in the situation. Thank goodness. But I always acknowledged and honored his frustration, his curiosity, anything he wanted to do. Like, we talked it over and we did it as a team. I've always felt that respect goes both ways. Like, he needs to respect me, but I also need to respect him. And I think a lot of parents don't get that second part. It's all about children should respect their parents, but it goes both ways and it pays off tremendously.
Absolutely.
That's a great message. You know the age range of Ryan's half siblings?
Yeah. So they're all, let's see, for many years, he was the oldest, but now there's one girl who's a year older. So from 1989, I'm looking at my list. So all of us, we usually have this next to our desk, which is our list of half siblings.
Yeah.
Everybody gets their spreadsheet moment. Usually it's around 6 or 7 when you can't keep it in your mind anymore. The youngest is 96. So from 89 to 96. So 34 to 27. No, it's crazy. And here's the funny thing with Ryan. Well, last month he got 2 more boys. So now it's 5 boys and 24 girls.
Oh,
wow.
Interesting.
It's not like the population. Like, the population is pretty much 50-50. So this one, up until like last month, there were only 3 boys and all the rest were girls. Now at least we get 2 more boys in.
Right.
It's crazy. It is crazy.
That's
And
amazing.
so here's the difference too. So now for the last 5 years or so, all of the new siblings had no idea they were donor conceived.
Oh.
So they're all swabbing their cheeks and just wanting to learn about ancestry. And it's like, you have a half sister, you have a half brother, you have a half sister, you have a half sister, you have a half sister. And they're all shocked and upset and family turmoil, all this unnecessary family turmoil because the parents were never honest because of their own fears and worries and insecurities. So lucky for our families, this is what I do for, like, they join like the royal family of donor kids, right? So this is what I do. I do, counseling videos all day long with people who just found out, parents who are going to tell, all the different things that donor families go through. So my son's half siblings, they're lucky because they get into a half sibling group where people They create a soft landing pad. Many of them know what it's like to just find out. Everybody's handled with care and understanding and empathy. And we just make it as easy as possible and try to present it as positive as possible. Like, yes, it's shocking. You got some anger towards your parents. You got some conversations and healing, forgiveness, to do. But in the meantime, you've joined this group of really awesome 20, 30-year-olds. So, it's a positive thing too, even when it's like life altering and identity shaking and, all the rest of it. Don't forget, like, it's more love in your life,
Absolutely.
And it's, I can't put myself in a parent's position, but I can't imagine keeping a secret like that, especially today, knowing that Ancestry and 23andMe are like, everybody knows what that is. That you say Ancestry and they automatically know, oh yeah, the DNA test. So it's like, okay, got to be in the back of your mind that this could be coming out,
I think they
So
know
why
that.
not just be
Fear. Fear is very powerful. So usually it's the non-bio parent. And this is in LGBT families too. The non-bio parent is more hesitant with any kind of donor connections. It's a fear of, these people have a connection to my child that I don't have. And some people, and it's people who are maybe more insecure just by nature, they feel threatened by it, or they're afraid. For the heterosexual people with egg and sperm donors, my kid won't love me as much if they know I'm not the real or biological parent. So it's fear, and it's powerful. And a lot of times, when a sperm donor is used and the parents don't tell, the mom is protecting the dad. In egg donor families, the dad is protecting the mom. So it's an unhealthy cluster of reasons, but they're very powerful in keeping the truth from a child. And in my personal opinion, I think it's really selfish, right? Because it's putting your own needs and your own fears in front of what's best for your child.
Well, Kendall was adopted as an infant, and he's always known he was adopted. And the love for his parents is, we talk about them every day, and they've been gone for a long time. I've never got to meet them, unfortunately, but, they're part of our life every day. And then on the flip side, when we found his birth family, his mother still has not acknowledged,
Nope. 6 years in.
Well, here's the
At this
thing
point,
too. A lot of time, it has nothing to do with you, and I'm sure you know this. When donors say no or there's no response, it's something with them. They don't have the emotional bandwidth. They're not at a good place in life. They're embarrassed about where they're at in life. They have mental struggles. They have physical struggles. So it's not you per se. It's what she's got going on.
It doesn't make it less painful, though.
No, it's true. I try to be adult about it, but I have my moments. Corey will tell you.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
When I struggle, and I have deep love for my sisters, my mother's two children, 2 daughters, and my half brother on that side. But it's difficult for me to relate to them at some level because of this disconnect between, I don't have a relationship with our mother. And I joked with my sisters a long time ago and said, if one more person tells me how wonderful she is, I'm going to throw up. Like, I don't need to hear that anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, she has a lot to prove,
Yeah.
And she probably is a good person, but it's an awkward,
You just can't.
unfair.
Do you know why?
Position.
Do you know why?
We've never been given a full answer.
No.
We think it might have something to do with the gay thing.
Yeah.
It's so buried that even though it got dug up a little bit, it's like she's reburied it.
Yeah.
She can't. It's too painful for her to acknowledge, because then she'd have to go through a bunch of emotions. That's what I'm saying. Like, some people don't have the emotional bandwidth to take those steps forward. It takes a lot, and you just have to have self-awareness to kind of make that journey. You have to have good support to take that journey, and maybe she's just not able. She can't do it.
Yeah, I know. And I find myself not showing her as much grace as I should for my definition of what that is. And I've been wrestling with that because part of me is angry, of course, that she's had 6 years to reach out and hasn't. But then the other side of that equation is exactly what you just said. Who am I to judge how she must feel?
Well, but the thing is, both things can happen at the same time. It's not one or the other, right? So
Mhm.
you have your
Mhm.
anger. It's appropriate. It's not like it's inappropriate anger. No, it's totally appropriate. And at the same time, you don't have to wait for the anger to be gone. You can keep exploring the empathetic part of, like, given what she has, she's doing the best that she can do. And right now she can't do it. She doesn't have the ability to take those next steps. And it's
Yep.
okay to acknowledge both of those. And I'm really pissed off. It's not fair. And it isn't fair, right? So
Right.
it's all appropriate, but it can all happen at the same time so that maybe you can feel that there's some kind of a movement in your process
Mhm.
too. You don't want to get stuck in
Mhm.
the anger.
And
Right.
we do believe, from what we've heard from Kendall's father and others, that they both really wanted to keep the baby, and they just weren't given that choice. They were so young, they were not given that opportunity. And so I'm sure that's part of it. It's
Sure.
like that you have to, like, I got to turn this off because I can't, cry every day because, my baby was taken away.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, they really were not empowered to do that, which, I have differing feelings sometimes about my grandparents, but I know that if my 15-year-old were pregnant, I'm not saying I wouldn't have thought the same thing, like,
Back then.
right, especially back then. There was such a different stigma attached to her as a pregnant teen.
Right. Then you'd have to acknowledge she had sex, which nobody did back then.
Exactly.
We know, yes, teenagers
Right.
have sex. Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but at least you have been able to make contact with her daughters then, right? And her
Yes.
son.
Yeah. Yep. I
So
feel
you've
really,
got some little
especially,
more pieces.
absolutely. And my mother's sister has been wonderful. She's great to Corey and me. She just, she texts us, she calls us, she sends us cards.
Good.
She's not a replacement for my mother, but she definitely fills the bill for a nice auntie.
Well, and it's funny when you mentioned Ryan writing the letter to Lance, or sending the email to Lance. It immediately reminded me of Kendall couldn't, once he and his brother found out, like, discovered together, who his birth mother was. Yes, they're on Facebook. Yes,
I have waited 47 years to find these people. What if something bad's about to happen? I have to reach out to them this instant. So I completely can relate to Ryan's sentiment. Yeah.
And he did. I mean,
Oh my
he
God.
played a shocker out there because his sister, got the message and was confused by it because she had no idea that Kendall existed. And she showed the message to Kendall's mother and she went bone white and, almost fainted. And it's like, okay, I guess this is
No,
true
it's
then.
a secret he carried. And this is true in the donor world too. When it's a secret that the parents have carried for decades, they don't realize the burden of the secret, but they carry that secret every day. And it's a huge burden, but it's all they know is carrying the secret.
Mhm.
And so therefore, it's really hard. They don't know how to let it go.
Yeah.
What would life look like without that secret, without that burden of that secret, right?
Well, and I think one thing that's really unfair is that you're burdening whoever else knows the secret, even if they're not the parent, you're burdening them as well. So the only people that knew, as far as we know, were her husband and her sister. And it's like, this sweet woman
That's not
who,
fair.
like, I've got a nephew out there somewhere, that I probably will never get to meet.
Well, and my mother is still dealing with that because my stepfather's, her husband's family is huge, and they don't know about me. So it's bizarre. It's like, I'm 53 years old. How long do you need to keep this secret?
Well, is this shame? Is this a shame-based secret still?
I
She's
think
ashamed
so.
that she gave
I
a
think
child
so.
up for adoption?
Or was,
Still.
promiscuous at such a young
Yeah,
age.
but
You
50
quickly do
years
the math.
ago. Yeah.
I
Right.
know.
No, I
I
think
know.
the shame at this point is maybe twofold, that she gave a child up for adoption and that she's refusing contact. Like,
Yeah, I'm sure
I'd
Mhm.
be
there's
ashamed
got to be
of
some
that.
guilt there. But I guess
I mean, I have to ask this, are they a religious family?
They claim to be, and they live in Southern Louisiana, but it doesn't sound like my family is part of that progressive movement.
Well, there you go. I mean, that explains a lot
Yeah.
too. So in that cultural realm, it's harder for us to understand because we're not in that. But if we were in that cultural realm, we might feel strongly about keeping the secret too, because we're going to be judged by our peers, you know? So it makes
Right.
more sense to me. Yeah.
But Kendall is from Arkansas, and he's coming from the flip side of that, where his parents were very religious but also progressive, and they were very open about everything from the get-go. And
Yeah.
so, like, coming from the South, he's experienced what it should be.
Right.
Right. So you're
Just so
constantly
fortunate to
having
have.
to reconcile
Yeah.
really good things that you're happy that they happen this way. Then you have the really frustrating thing with the woman who really needs to get in to see a therapist to work through this, Well,
Yes.
like I always tell people, a no doesn't mean a no forever. So I know it's still no, and it's been 6 years, but you never shut the door totally. Like
Right.
sometimes people just come around in their own time,
Yeah.
and so
True.
your door isn't slammed closed forever. There's always hope there, right? That she
Yes.
will have an
Absolutely.
epiphany and something will happen where she knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I remind him of that at least once a week. I totally get the frustration and the anger, but just knowing Kendall, like, if all of a sudden she called 2 minutes from now, he would be happy to take that call.
Of course.
Of
I
course.
just want to
Yeah,
know.
but I think at that point you'd probably let go of the anger just like that, right? Because now we
Yep.
have what I want to have. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I really get it. I mean, I talk to a lot of donor conceived people and parents who reach out to the donors, and the donor spouse isn't on board. Like the spouse
Right.
is saying, hey, you don't even have time for our kids. How are you going to make time
Right.
for all these other kids? Or I've
Right.
had one spouse say, if you connect with your donor kids, I will commit suicide. I mean, sometimes it's like
Ugh.
Mhm.
that strong of the spouse, and the guy says no. There's the shame of being a donor. I sold my sperm and I'm ashamed of that. And I'm embarrassed if the world knew about that. So it's it's very parallel here in that embarrassment and shame and what other people will think or demands that they make on you are all pushing you into keeping a secret, right? And what that
Yes.
secret does is hurt another human being, because you can't be there as in the way that you should be for another human that you helped to create.
I'm sure there are a lot of spouses out there that don't have any idea that their husband donated, because it's like, I
Oh,
did
I
that back
know
in
there
college, and
are.
I'm not going to, keep that secret.
Oh, well, secrecy implies shame, right? So
Right.
they're saying that
Absolutely.
there's something to be ashamed of. Well, you help somebody. Yeah, you sold your sperm, but you helped it, like I wouldn't have my son if somebody hadn't sold their
Right.
sperm, So
Right.
it's nothing to be embarrassed of. But I think some guys are ashamed that they did that they actually created many human beings in the world that they have no responsibility for. And that doesn't feel right to them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they're ashamed or embarrassed about it, and therefore they keep it a secret. The male's infertility, still, there's shame around it. Like, I'm not fully a man if I'm infertile. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
another reason for better keep everything hush hush.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is so strange because it's a biological thing that most people would have no control over,
Well, it's like
It's not
you're not embarrassed if you have diabetes. Like, Why would you be
Exactly.
embarrassed if your body is in another way not functioning the way it could? No, it's
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
crazy. But it's like a
Yeah,
mental sterility, virility.
for sure.
So, Wendy, I think you would know this probably better than anybody we've ever talked to, but something that we've talked about between me and Kendall and a couple of our guests, just because we interviewed a brother and sister who knew each other as teenagers working together, but didn't know that they were half siblings. And I think that even contemplated dating. And a lot of people are coming from the same region. So, have you encountered donor
Many.
conceived people who, yeah,
Many.
Mm.
Yeah. So the
wow.
sperm banks said for a long time, well, statistically speaking, this is impossible. A donor child will never
Mm.
meet their half siblings. Oh my God. We hear about random meetings all the time. And we have for years, on a
Mm.
playground, at camp, one donor's daughter was the counselor to her half brother. Two half brothers were on the same little league team. One girl in college was in the same class as her half brother. It's very probable, and it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got to assume that there are half siblings that are married and don't know it, don't know that they're half siblings.
Yeah, we know that for sure.
Mm.
So, my son and I used to joke, when he was a teenager, if you ever become serious with someone, like, you got to check for her donor number, ask her if she's donor conceived. And let's say she's one of the 90% whose parents are lying to her. Like, I'm going to have to go to the parents and say, look, I need to know, is she donor conceived? And if so, sperm bank donor number. It was like kind of funny for us, but I think it's not funny if it happens,
That's right.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, this has been,
You.
I mean, you're a cool mom.
Yeah.
So I hope you know that. And I hope Ryan tells you that on the regular.
I will remind him to do that today.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going to think about all the similarities that came up between your story and my story a lot because, I was so fortunate to have very, very forthcoming adoptive parents who never made me feel stigmatized at all. My hometown, I have to give it credit, again, not very progressive, but very open to the fact that I was an adopted kid who talked about it a lot, like kind of like how Ryan walked up to adults. I wasn't quite at that level of talking about it, but I remember many times when I would meet my parents' friends who hadn't seen them for, a few years, and it would always make us all chuckle, my mom, dad, and me, when people would say, "Oh, this is your son. I can see, you look, Kendall, you look so much like," and I'm like, me at 5 years old, I was like, "That's cute. That's sweet. That's not real. I don't really look like these people. I love them. They're handsome and beautiful, but I'm not their kid." You know what I mean? Like, I was just very forthcoming and very like, "It's okay. I got this," And
Yeah.
I respected my parents so much for just being truthful. I really
And
did.
normalizing it for you, that it wasn't good or bad. It was something that was. It was a
Yep.
part of your identity,
Yeah.
This is who you are. And then at what age did you become curious, or did you as a child become curious about your biological parents?
I always was. I remember my mother told me that I was like 4, and I would come in and say, maybe we'd had one of those interactions with people, and I'd say things like, "Well, I don't really look like the Montgomery side of the family or the Austin side of the family. I wonder who I do look like." And my mother, of course, was very nurturing. Well, they both were, but she would hug me and say, "Oh, honey, that doesn't matter." But she understood what I was asking. She understood that at some point that was going to become even more important to me. And it did, especially because I lost them so young. My mother died when I was 10 and my dad when I was 16. So for me, I was already ready, but as soon as they both had passed, I definitely was ready to just jump headlong into any avenue I could use to find my biological family. There really wasn't much. I had many doors slammed. I wrote letters like Ryan. I just happened to be 18 when I did it. It was disheartening, and you just start to kind of got to a point of acceptance in my 20s where I was like, I'm never going to find anybody. This is long before the DNA option was there. And I just thought, well, that's okay. I've always been an only child, and I still am, and that's okay. And, and I felt fortunate to have all the cousins and, aunts and uncles that I had. So, you kind of just stifle that interest at some point, sadly, until, all this DNA stuff
Right.
became a possibility.
I'm a journalist, and I could not have the story not be, complete. So
Yeah.
I pushed and pushed and pushed, and
Yeah.
and it happened.
And here you
And then
are.
I think so.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean, I think
I don't
we're
know.
all in the middle of our story. My
Yes.
son, he's at least you're not going to get half siblings every month. You know what I mean? So
True.
that's the
Yeah.
one difference.
Although we do
between
joke
a-
about my father.
Yeah, I mean, Kendall's father was
Prolific.
yes,
Prolific
yes,
is the nice term that we're going to use.
yes.
So you could get some more half siblings.
He had some good swimmers. Let's just put it that
Yeah.
way.
I remember when I
Wow.
met him and I shook his hand and I was like, you do have a seat. We should talk about what you should have known when you were 15. I
Right.
was like, there are ways around, procreating. And it was just a good joke. And I think I embarrassed him slightly. He didn't know me well enough to know I was just being a big goofball about it. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you impregnate 3 different women within 3 years,
girls.
I'm sorry,
They were
girls,
They were
3 different girls within 3 years, then,
Oh
come on,
my.
at some point, like, when is the light bulb gonna click on?
No, we 3 boys from 3 different girls are 19 months is all that separates me from the younger. Yeah, he got.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Oh, holy cow.
Yep. I know.
That's a story.
Yes.
Yep. And now you know why we're doing this podcast. Originally this was going to be a book, and then we encountered a couple of situations where I was like, well, maybe not.
Right.
What
now.
about a podcast?
Yeah.
Now we're back to yes, the book is coming. The book is coming for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's a wild story, and as you said, we're still in the middle of it.
You've got the breadth and the depth, right? So lots of relationships and yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and we've learned so much and met so many wonderful people through this podcast, and it's like it's a free therapy session for us. Every time we interview somebody,
It
too,
is.
which is great. But it's just, I mean, it's Kendall is is part of this greater community, and it's not just adoptees and donor. It's everybody. They're really part of that community, and if we can, shine a little light and help somebody, or maybe convince a parent to share that secret, finally, then our job is complete.
Absolutely. Well, and it's also the more you talk about it, then these kind of things are in the zeitgeist, right? It's not like
Right.
Yes.
weird or unusual or hard to talk about. It's just your family. It's just the way your family was created, which is a little bit different than the majority of other people. Same with
Right.
us and same with donor families. It's just a family. Like we're all trying to figure it out. What are we to each other? And do we want to see each other all the time? And, it's like that with any family, right? The people that you bond with or the people that you have more in common with or similar interests or whatever, just because you're genetically related doesn't mean, you're going to bond. So we're all like
True.
figuring
Right.
out what is family to us, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
family is people who we're not biologically related to. And sometimes it is, especially in the LGBT community, I hear DNA doesn't make a family. Well, sure it does. Of course it does.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
don't be afraid to say that it does. It's
Yeah.
not the only way to make family,
Right.
but don't dismiss or negate that is valid for donor conceived people. It matters.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So don't be
Absolutely.
afraid of it. It's okay. All these ideas can coexist at once, right? So there are many ways to
Exactly.
make a family.
And who
And
doesn't want a
DNA
bigger family, right? I mean, we
That's
moved
I
to
mean,
San
that's what we
Francisco,
say.
and we created a chosen family out there because we didn't have any. Actually did have a cousin out there, but otherwise, we created a family out there, and so we've got both sides of it. I've got my bio family now. We're living in New England. We've got Kendall's bio family, and it's there's nothing wrong with having a huge family.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's not like there's only a certain amount of love that I have, and then that's going to get used up. It's like, no, if you have 3 family members, there's enough love. And if you have 50 or 100 family members, there's still enough love to go around. It's not a finite thing. Expanding family makes life interesting.
Right. So, Wendy, can you tell my mom that it's okay that we have 5 dogs because we have enough love for all of them?
I have 3, so I get it. You guys are 2 guys and 5.
5
Hey,
and 2 cats.
it's
And 2
the
cats.
only time it's hard is when I have 3 dogs and 2 hands. So you
Yeah.
have to, if you're petting them all at once, you got to keep moving so everybody gets
Oh,
a
yeah.
pet. That's the only
For sure.
challenging thing.
True.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And staff, apparently. You know,
Yes,
I could use
a helper.
a helper sometimes, but they're
I hear
fun
ya.
and they're tiny, but they're still a handful.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Well,
Absolutely. I hear you.
this has been delightful. Thank you so much for what you do and for sharing your story. And if Ryan's open to it, we'd love to have him on at some point. You know, that would be great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he would do it.
That was Wendy Kramer, and I think we're all still catching our breath. Her story, and Ryan's, shine a light on what's possible when we choose honesty, connection, and empathy over secrecy and shame. At Family Twist, we know how painful and liberating it can be to unearth a long-buried truth. And Wendy's work with the Donor Sibling Registry is living proof that healing can begin the moment we stop hiding. Wendy, thank you for your courage, your humor, and your relentless pursuit of what's right. And to our listeners, if you're on your own Family Twist journey, know this: you're not alone. There's a whole community here for you. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.